There's one coach in the sport of college football who revolutionized today's game. His playstyle led to 11 years of his QBs being in the top 50 passing yard seasons in FBS history, as well as the total number of passing yards in his 21 years as head coach eclipsing 100,000 yards, which is where I labeled him as the man who created college football's greatest passing dynasty. His name, Mike Leach. The date is November 20th, 1999. The Texas Tech Red Raiders football team was looking for a new head coach as hometown man Spike Dykes retired after the '99 season. Big 12 rival for Texas Tech, the Oklahoma Sooners on the other hand, went 7-5 in '99 under first-year head coach Bob Stoops. But where the Sooners also led the Big 12 in pass attempts, passing yards, and passing touchdowns. A huge stat upgrade from the previous '98 season, and I think it had to do with one man, Mike Leach. What made Mike Leach unique was that in this period of football, there were many teams who used an offensive play style of ground and pound, a run-heavy offensive philosophy which utilizes power running backs. Leach instead used an offensive play style called an air raid offense. As you can tell from the title of the play style, it involves an emphasis on passing over running. The quarterback would be in the shotgun, which allows better visibility and quicker passes, where it featured 4 to 5 wide receivers on a field, making defenses defend every inch of the field. Referring back to Oklahoma in 1999, they threw the ball 512 times to rushing the ball 292 times. Then just 19 days after Texas Tech's head coaching position opened up, Mike Leach was named the new head coach on December 9th, 1999. Now Mike Leach inherited an interesting roster for his first year in Lubbock, and where his Red Raiders team's top receiver in '99 was their running back. He would have to rely on sophomore QB Cliff Kingsbury in his first season, who would follow in Leach's footsteps later in his coaching career. Now for season 1, Texas Tech finished 7-6, ending with a bowl loss to East Carolina, but the offensive game was evident. The Red Raiders threw the ball 614 times and completed 373 of those passes. Both of those stats led the nation. Cliff Kingsbury threw 36 more passes and completed 41 more passes than the number 2 guy on the lists. Kingsbury also led the Big 12 in passing yards, touchdowns, and unfortunately interceptions, but a little expected with the scheme. Season 2 at Texas Tech showed that Mike Leach's first year was no fluke. The Red Raiders once again finished with just 7 wins, but the offense took another step forward. Cliff Kingsbury improved his passing yardage and touchdown totals while cutting down on turnovers, becoming one of the most productive quarterbacks in the Big 12. Then 2002 arrived, and this is where the rest of college football started to realize what Mike Leach was building in Lubbock. In his final college season, Kingsbury set the NCAA record for 712 pass attempts in a single season, breaking a 12-year record and pass completions of 479. Kingsbury also eclipsed 5,000 passing yards and threw 45 touchdowns, turning Texas Tech into one of the most explosive offenses in the country. All of this earned Kingsbury 9th in the Heisman voting, along with him and Leach leading the Red Raiders to a 9-5 record. And as it turned out, Kingsbury was only the first QB to thrive in Leach's passing dynasty. Because year number 4 would turn out to be one of the greatest statistical seasons college football had ever seen, not just from a quarterback under Mike Leach, but all time. After spending 3 years as a backup, B.J. Simmons took over Cliff Kingsbury and immediately proved the passing dynasty wasn't slowing down. Simmons shattered NCAA records with 719 pass attempts, this still stands to this day, and 5,833 passing yards, a record that stood for nearly 2 decades before Bailey Zappi finally broke it in 2021. He also threw 52 touchdown passes and set the then single-game record of passing yards in a game at 661. More importantly, Simmons showed that Leach's offense wasn't dependent on a star QB. Kingsbury was gone, but the production somehow even got crazier. Despite one of the greatest single-season passing efforts in college football history, Simmons finished just 10th in the Heisman voting, a little low if you ask me. If anyone thought B.J. Simon's historical season was just an anomaly, they were wrong. In 2004, Sonny Cumbie stepped in for his lone year as a starter and led the nation with 4,742 passing yards, while once again, a Red Raiders QB led college football in completions and pass attempts. Then in 2005, Cody Hodges took over and kept the dynasty rolling, leading the Big 12 with 31 touchdown passes, while also finishing with the nation's most completions and attempts. Despite replacing their starting QB for a 3rd straight season, Texas Tech never missed a beat. The Red Raiders won a combined 17-7 over those 2 years and even reached the 2005 Cotton Bowl, where they sadly lost 13-10 to a pre-Saban Alabama team. By this point, it became clear to everyone that Mike Leach wasn't just producing great seasons, he was building an assembly line of elite passers through this offense. But peak Mike Leach Texas Tech football came in 06 to 08 because one man solidified himself as the greatest passer in Texas Tech history. That quarterback was Graham Harrell. As a sophomore in 2006, it was a classic Mike Leach QB season for Harrell, leading the nation in attempts and completions while also leading the Big 12 in passing yards and touchdowns. However, junior year in 07, Harrell took it to the next level as we witnessed once again a record-shattering season for a Texas Tech QB and a wide receiver. Harrell completed an NCAA record 512 passes while throwing for 5,705 yards and 48 touchdowns. His 71.8 completion rate was the highest ever by a Mike Leach quarterback at Texas Tech. At the same time, redshirt freshman Michael Crabtree exploded onto the national stage, finishing in the record books for receivers in college football history with 134 catches, 1,962 yards, and 22 touchdowns. Together, they turned Texas Tech into one of the most dangerous offenses the sport has ever seen. But the peak of this peak of Texas Tech football came the next season in 2008. Entering the season, Texas Tech received its highest preseason ranking in years, being number 12, and quickly justified the hype. Texas Tech would start the year 8-0, climbing up to number 6 in the rankings. And Graham Harrell wasn't slowing down either, throwing for 393 yards a game and having 28 touchdowns during that run. Then came the game that defined the Mike Leach era. Number 1 Texas in Lubbock became an all-time classic, where the Red Raiders saw themselves down 1 with 8 seconds left on their own 28-yard line with a timeout left, meaning they could take a shot at the end zone. Harrell threw it near the 5-yard line to sophomore Michael Crabtree, who caught, spun out of 2 tackles, then scored the game-winning touchdown. It was straight madness. Fans stormed the field before the clock hit 0, where Texas Tech had to kick off from their own 8-yard line as fans stood right on the sidelines, but still secured the upset. With this 39-33 victory, it moved the team up to the number 2 spot in the country. Although a loss at Oklahoma ended hopes of a national championship, Texas Tech still finished 11-2 for the season, their best season since 1973. Harrell threw for more than 5,000 yards and 45 touchdowns, finishing 4th in Heisman voting, while Crabtree finished 5th. One of the greatest football seasons in Tech history, which was topped off by Mike Leach finally winning his first Big 12 Coach of the Year award. This passing dynasty reached stratospheric levels of achievements. How could this be stopped? 2009 started off on a high note for Mike Leach. Texas Tech had decided to sign Leach to a 5-year contract extension worth $12.7 million. However, the 2009 season proved to be the most lackluster season under his passing dynasty, stat-wise. QB play didn't lead to any real numbers jumping off the screen, but the team did finish 9-4 with an Alamo Bowl victory, so that's a plus. What wasn't lackluster though, was what happened off the field in 2009. December 30th, 2009 to be exact. Mike Leach was fired from Texas Tech in wake of allegations that he mistreated one of his players. The university initially just suspended Leach, but Leach fought back by hiring an attorney and challenging the suspension. Instead, his attorney got handed a termination letter before the parties even met. The dismissal came one day before Leach was scheduled to receive an $800,000 bonus, also meaning that Alamo Bowl victory Leach wasn't a part of. He would receive a severance package of $400,000 annually for the next 4 years, and where Leach actually stepped back from coaching for 2 years. He instead put out 2 books, worked in television, and hosted a satellite radio show. Leach was just relaxing in life, not worried if his air raid offense would ever see the field again. Then came the next big opportunity, Washington State. November 30th, 2011 saw the university hire Leach to a 5-year deal to take over a struggling Cougar team who had 5 straight losing seasons. And this was the ultimate test for the passing dynasty. At Texas Tech, Leach had built up a passing powerhouse from the ground up. Now he would have to prove that his system could work again at an entirely different school, where the early results were pretty rough. Leach's first 3 years as a head coach though, he did not change the losing streak. Washington State had a record of 12-25 in that time. But beneath the losses, a familiar pattern was starting to emerge. The highlight of these 3 years became QB Connor Halliday, who recorded the second highest pass attempts in a season in 2013 with 714, only trailing Leach's old QB BJ Simmons. And where in 2014, Halliday could have set some big records. Before suffering a season-ending ankle injury, he was averaging over 430 yards per game and was on pace for roughly 6,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. Kind of helped he set the NCAA record for yards in a game at 734 that season. Even during losing seasons, Mike Leach was doing what Mike Leach always does. 2015 to 2017 became the Luke Falk Washington State era. This was the best 3-year stretch the program had seen in over 15 years, having a total record of 26-13. For most of that run, Falk put up exactly the kind of numbers you'd expect from a Mike Leach quarterback. In 2015 and 16, he led the nation in pass completions and pass attempts while completing nearly 70% of his throws. Across those 2 seasons, he totaled 9,000 yards and established himself as one of the most productive QBs in the nation. But 2017 felt different. Washington State opened the season ranked 24th and quickly climbed into the top 10 with a 6-0 start. The Cougars knocked off Boise State, USC, and Oregon, reaching as high as 8th in the country, before the season eventually unraveled and ended with a 9-4 record. So this was Falk's best season? Not statistically. Falk played much of the year with a broken wrist, throwing roughly 100 fewer passes than he had in the previous seasons. His yardage dropped, and his production wasn't quite at the level of his earlier years. Yet despite the injury, he still led the Pac-12 in both passing touchdowns and completions. Even in a down year by the Dynasty standards, Luke Falk was still one of the conference's most productive quarterbacks. Then came the most memorable and arguably most meme-worthy season Washington State has had in modern history. Before the 2018 season even began, 2 important things happened. First, Mike Leach signed a contract extension in December of 2017. Second, East Carolina graduate transfer Gardner Minshew arrived in Pullman looking for one final opportunity. Neither move seemed destined to change college football. Minshew wasn't viewed as a future star, he wasn't a highly touted recruit, and he wasn't expected to become one of the faces of the sport. But under Mike Leach's passing dynasty, everything changed. The 2018 season became the best in Washington State history. Minshew threw for over 4,700 yards, second in the nation in completion percentage, finished 5th in Heisman voting, and turned Washington State into an almost college football playoff contender. WSU got as high as 8th before the season finale against Washington, capping off the year with an Alamo Bowl victory, an 11-2 record, a great meme, and a Pac-12 Coach of the Year award for Leach. After the Gardner Minshew mania at Washington State, the Cougars kind of fell back down to earth. WSU had a rough 6-7 season under Leach, but the quarterback play was still breaking records. Senior Anthony Gordon threw for the 6th most passing yards in a season with 5,579 and completed a then 2nd most passes in NCAA history at 493. It was another testament to Leach's system. Even in a disappointing team season, Washington State's quarterback still put up historic passing numbers. But unfortunately, Leach's time at Washington State met an end. Mississippi State came calling, and on January 20th, 2020, Leach accepted the job, ending his 8-year run at Washington State. The final chapter to this passing dynasty was the Will Rogers era at MSU. True freshman Rogers played here and there the first couple games of the 2020 season, until KJ Costello got injured against Alabama Game 5, and Rogers was a starter for the rest of the season. A bad Mississippi State team this season as they went 4-7, and maybe the only down year in Leach's passing dynasty, just a total of 3,200 yards between both quarterbacks. 2021, however, saw one of the most efficient quarterback seasons of the entire Mike Leach era. Sophomore Will Rogers completed the 2nd most passes in NCAA history, completing 505, leading to a 73.9 completion percentage. This not only was the highest mark for a QB with Leach, this was the 5th highest mark all time in the sport. Rogers passed for 4,700 yards with 36 touchdowns to just 9 interceptions. The final season of Mike Leach's passing dynasty looked different from the explosive years that came before it, some mediocre numbers from Rogers. Once again though, Rogers did lead the nation in attempts and completions, but where his completion percentage dropped by 5% from the year prior, and he didn't even throw for 4,000 yards. To make this season even worse, the man of this video, Mike Leach, passed away of a heart condition on December 12, 2022. Mike Leach didn't just produce great quarterbacks, he changed football. From Tim Couch to Will Rogers, his air raid offense rewrote record books for more than 2 decades and influenced an entire generation of coaches. The passing dynasty may have ended in 2022, but its impact on the game will never. With the passing of Mike Leach, he left a legacy of coaches behind that followed his air raid scheme, from Art Briles, Lincoln Riley, Cliff Kingsbury, and Sonny Dykes to name a few. And this wasn't just a system, it was a revolution. At the time when most college football was still revolved around running the ball, Mike Leach bet everything on the pass.
If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, the subscribe button, and hitting the bell notifications. Thank you.